I worked as a foreign correspondent earlier on, like in Korea or Chile or South Africa, and I always teamed up with American journalists. And I have high respect of them. But I kept wondering, why did they keep telling the story from Dole's perspective? Why didn't they dig deeper?
The thing that was most surprising about the media coverage of the suit that came out against you was how easily you were a fraud and Dole was wronged and the banana company was fighting for justice. And no reporter should ever take that at face value. We have an astounding lack of curiosity on the part of the journalism community in the US, a lack of skepticism. These journalists failed in their job. They took a press release and reprinted it, basically. They didn't do any due diligence, and that is even more shameful than the film festival disavowing you.
We have a media that is corrupted by power, mostly by corporate power. You have corporate ownership from the top, you have corporate advertising coming in from the side. We have a media that is where advertising and money and corporate influence is really the mother's milk.
The reality is that the media is much more willing to take down stories when a company comes to them and say, listen, don't write that story now because you're going to look stupid. And we will go out with a massive denial and we'll go after your media organization as well. I know of global corporations in the US who have threatened to pull advertising from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, because they don't like the editorial coverage. So there isn't as much investment in investigative journalism as there was in the past. Journalism itself is under threat.
Dole was spending a lot of money on this story. They have an American PR company contacting journalists around the world.
Gibraltar is one of the prominent public relations firms in Washington. They're located in the heart of downtown, just about a block from the White House. It's really hard to know what Gibraltar is up to or who they even work for because they're not obligated to disclose any of that information. Proctor used to work for the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq, which the United States government set up shortly after the invasion that overthrew Saddam Hussein. So he would have been involved in frequent strategy meetings about how to sell the Iraq war. And part of selling that war would have also been to attack the critics and to make the critics look bad. And if you look at the roster of any of the top lobbying and public relation firms in town, they're filled with former members of Congress, former administration officials, former CIA officials. Increasingly, journalists are going the same route.
We now occupy an era of extreme reputation anxiety among leading companies around the world because they're very aware their corporate reputation, which they may have built over 50 years or so, can be shredded in a matter of minutes. So when a company feels that it's under potential attack, you either try and divert attention from the real story, or you have a snow dump of good alternative information. So they will go out there and say, listen, we've got this story about our reputation being under fire by this disreputable Swedish filmmaker acting for a lawyer who we think is fraudulent. You can have this exclusively. We'll give you all the background information. And you plant the story.
So if it's Fredrik's a bad guy, if I can get that narrative into the newspapers first and make it sticky and appeal to people in a way that they'll want to tell their friends, then that's the story that will go out.
There was a Swedish documentary maker who went to Nicaragua. He did a documentary on how pesticides have damaged the health of workers there. The problem was that was not the case. These workers were recruited by a lawyer down there who wanted to make a case. He wanted he had a beef against Dole, basically. And so he recruited a bunch of Nicaraguan banana harvesters to lie and say that their health was damaged. The Swedish filmmaker made the documentary, and he didn't find out it was a fraud until the film was done. This guy still wants to show the film because he went through the process of making the documentary. And
he's an artist.
You know.
Even our own movie trailer would have a Dole link. Aggressive comments appeared in the commentary track after online articles. Can you also buy false grassroots on the internet?
There is no question at all that people at the moment in strategic communications are using false identities in the virtual space to raise awareness of certain issues. You put 30 people in a room who are paid to pretend to be brand advocates. Now, that's essentially what people are talking about with this kind of false grassroots campaigning, which is astroturfing, and that's illegal.
Of course they are. No question.
Strategic communications have a stream of people they're hiring who aren't from traditional PR backgrounds. And that includes former members of the security services, former members of psychological operations, former members of essential behavioral change industries that clearly, up until recently, were fairly covert. As a consequence now, the lines of service offering are getting a bit blurred because these people are coming in with non-traditional approaches. So, for example, you might look at someone you're trying to supposedly take down, smear, whatever it may be, by looking at the way in which you could put fissures between themselves and their support structure. One of the ways they may have assessed your battle worthiness, your ability to sustain the fight, would be to look at your finances. Another one would be to look at where you are with your life at the moment. I mean, are you an alcoholic? Are you suffering from stress? Are you know, you've got to look at the individual that's coming against you. Are there masses of skeletons in the closet? Have you done this before? Would that involve perhaps the services of a private investigator or something? Phone hacking, email reading. It happens. People buy and sell those kind of services all over the world. And when you've got hundreds of $million industry that needs to protect its reputation, a few million being spent on a campaign to do just that is probably good money, well spent.
For him and you to say the film was based on facts is further proof that I understand about your finances, that WGE is desperate.
I think you're being a little bit naive if you think that you can take a pop at a big multinational and expect to walk away without some sort of fight on your hands.
I want to say I'm not connected with Dole in any way, but I do object to the antics of publicity-hungry filmmakers like Gertten.
They spend millions on their brand every year, and you're going to come in and start sullying their brand and start attacking their brand. What did you think was going to happen?
But you, as a producer, have a duty to the truth.
The letter was addressed to me, but it mainly targeted Fredrik. The hatred was aimed at him, while I was mainly to be pitied since I obviously was misguided. Like, if you stop working with him, everything will work out well for you. Fredrik urged me to pull out, said he would weather this on his own. But how could I look myself in the eye if I did that? I just couldn't do it. We made this film together, and we will see through this together.
Lincoln, is there something in it that you think looks really dangerous or something you didn't expect or so?
No. In fact, if you read the opposition, it really is just a rehash of the complaint. There's really not much more.
We decided to fight back. we countersued Dole and filed a motion arguing that Dole had used the weight of a lawsuit to suppress our freedom of speech.